Hey guys, Yannick here, developer of Zeepkist. I recently did something pretty stupid, and I had to spend the next 11 hours, well, not at once, but the next couple of days, working off and on, fixing my stupidity. What happened was I had updated my Blender from Blender 2.79 to Blender 2.92. In itself, this shouldn't be very big of an issue, except I always put my Blender files inside Unity and use the Blender files themselves as the mesh files. That's not always recommended, although I never really understood it. I do now. For the following reason. Blender files are project files, and they change, or they can change, when upgrading to newer versions of Blender. When this happens, there is a possibility of Unity losing the connection between the meshes inside game objects and the meshes themselves in the Blender file. The reference gets lost in the process or something. And that's what happened with me as well. And I thought, oh well, no big deal, I can just go back one version inside GitHub and fix it like that. However, for some reason that didn't work, and when I went back one version, the Blender models were still missing. Well, the meshes, the references were missing, even though the models themselves were still of the old Blender file format version. And this problem stayed even when I went back into 2.92 version Blender. It was a whole mess. All of my references were missing, and I've got some screenshots here. It wasn't good. So I decided to fix it. I decided to get rid of every single one of my Blender project files inside Unity, put them outside of Unity, and instead in Unity work with .fbx files, exported meshes. However, this meant that I had to go through all of Zeepkist and select every single mesh and replace it with a different mesh. This was not an automatic process. All of this had to be done by hand. And, well, this is that story. I've made a time lapse of 11 hours of work. It's in total about 47 minutes. This is for the diehard Zeepkist fans, I guess. Sit back and enjoy, because we'll dive in and I'll narrate what's happening. So first things first, I had a lot of models inside scenes that weren't prefabs, but were still models. And all of those mesh references inside those models were missing. So either I went through every single game object, checked the mesh filter to see if the reference was missing, if it had mesh filters even, and then replaced them, or I made a tool to find every single one of the missing meshes. Well, I obviously went with the second option because that was a lot quicker. However, I had no idea how to make tools like that. So that's a whole bunch of Googling and then figuring out what to do. I made a menu item, they call it, inside Unity, which is like the little bar at the top. You can press like File, Edit, Assets, Game Object, Components, Open Scene. I made a Find Meshes menu item, and I attached a shortcut key to that. I went with Alt-M. If you press Alt-M, it runs the code inside of the Unity editor. And the code I wrote was fairly simple. Just find every single component of type. I believe it's called Find Object of Type. And I did that. So I just coded that, and whenever I pressed Alt-M, it would find for me the next model that had a missing mesh. The first models I fixed, as you can see here, are the dynamic models from the construction update, like the barriers and stuff. Right, okay. So now I am working on the second tool. Finding meshes is one thing. That can be automated. Replacing them can be automated. You still need to manually select the replacement mesh from a whole list of meshes, and that's the window you sometimes see with all of the different models. But a game object has two components with meshes. You have the mesh filter, which is what gets rendered, and then you have the mesh collider, which is the physics representation of that mesh. So per game object, I needed to replace two meshes. So I made a tool to automate that. I made it so that I manually replaced the rendering mesh. Oh, sorry for that. And I then could press another button and it would automatically copy that mesh to the component, the mesh collider as well. That sped up a lot of things and again saved me a lot of headaches. It's all about making your work easier. Time is money. As they usually say. Jeez, what the hell am I doing? Trees and stuff. Right, so yeah, I would rather spend 15 minutes, half an hour making a tool. That would down the line save me hours and hours of work. It's just a better use of your time, even if it is something you've never done before. Yeah, here I'm still going through the tool. First of all, I tried to use find object of type, which is a function which, it finds objects of type. However, I ran into an issue with that, because it does not find objects that are disabled. I don't know why. It doesn't make sense to me, but that's how Unity rolls. So eventually I ran into the issue that it would not find the meshes of game objects that weren't active. So I had to rip out find objects of type and change it with a different, an algorithm basically. The new algorithm was pretty simple. You just take all of the root objects inside a scene, then for every root object, iterate through all of its children and do a get component check. And if you get the mesh filter component, then you know, here's a mesh, and the tool selects that scene. What you're seeing here is me messing with the cat. I had to make sure that the axis of Blender models lined up properly. Unity uses the y-axis as up, and Blender uses the z-axis as up. So I had to make sure that all worked when exporting. It was especially difficult for the rigs of cats. They're kind of bendy, and that broke because of the new axis, and I had to fix that. It was a whole thing. But that was fixed after a couple minutes. And now we're on to... Oh, we're gone. Yeah, the construction update blocks was one of the first things I fixed. As you can see, I'm just going through every single object in the scene. My tool automatically selects the next game object that has a missing mesh, and I got to, then select a replacement mesh. You could see the trees, they were smaller because the scaling was also messed up when importing, so I had to turn off some settings, turn on some settings, and then actually scale some models as well to make sure that all worked. You can still see how the character model is the old broken blend file, which had to be replaced. And here I'm just going through all of my models, putting them in different folders, taking them out of Unity. Here I'm bunching a bunch of models together into one file. Yeah, that's another thing I could do. Because I now had to go through every single one of my models, I could just as well restructure them, the folder structure. It was a big mess because I'd done everything, off the cuff on my shirt, basically. Is that an expression? I don't know. But I could now put structure where before there wasn't any. Because that's another nice thing. When you're working with Blender files, Unity imports every single model. However, when you're working with exported files, you can tell Blender, oh, I only want these specific models to be exported. And the other models, which might be trash or helper models or reference models or templates, you can just leave those out of the export, which makes the project a lot cleaner. Here I was deleting a whole bunch of things. Now nothing's happening. And that was the intro scene done, so we're now on to the main menu. So again, I had to take the model, put it in a new model. The blend project, put it in a new blend project, export it, you know. This is the old blacktop car wash. In my previous game, you could drive through the car wash and your car would get fixed. This is something I did in an internship once. A lot of models inside of the main menu are just funny references to stuff I did in the past. Which really... this is from Texture. It's a first-person shooter I once made with networking and stuff and a lot of spaghetti code, so I binned that eventually. But yeah, the main menu was full of reference to stuff I did in the past, which really only I get. Like there's a car I made in Roblox once. This car is from Blacktop as well. It didn't line up for some reason. Wheels are very difficult to get right. They either seem too small or way too big. It's very strange. This was a spaceship I made for Blacktop, which was just going to be like a prop you could see parked on a spaceport or something. This was a bus based on a Greyhound bus. This is a tank from Texture, which was also a prop. You couldn't actually drive those. This was the last Blacktop model I ever made. It was like a van. I should really get back to Blacktop one time, I think. Like if I ever get the chance and money and stuff to work on that. It seems like a fun project. Here I am. Yeah, just fixing the main menu. And this is what time code are we at? We are 9 minutes in. So this is probably like after 1 or 2 or 3 hours or something. Still had a lot of stuff to go through. This is the monorail track I'm fixing. Now you may be wondering, what the hell is the monorail track? I've never seen a monorail. You can see it in the background of the main menu, like a little monorail going around an oval track. I made the monorail a couple months ago actually, but never got around putting it into the game itself yet. There's still some physics stuff with it I need to fix, and then, well, just put it in somewhere. It's coming in the future is what I'm trying to say. And then this is Zaagbladpad, Revolution Toad in English. And that's a little toad you unlock at some level down the road. You were a car in like a saw blade. Yeah, you were a toad in a saw blade car, and you had to destroy the police and capitalist oppression and stuff like that. It was pretty fun. For some reason, I didn't win the the game jam that was for it. That was a bit strange, but what are you gonna do? You can't win everything, I suppose. Yeah, in the process of actually removing old Blender project files from Unity, I sometimes remove too much, and then I had to go back inside GitHub and download the old project files and get the missing models from that, import them in the new project files. That was then again a whole thing. This entire project was like 20% just finding the right models that I had to import and export and fix and stuff. And here we are. Yeah, this is the tree gun actually in the level editor. It's far more complicated than it should need to be. You could just have it be like, oh, let's click somewhere with the mouse and spawn a tree. No, I had to make a physical gun which shoots a ray with like particle effects and stuff. It's totally overkill for what it's supposed to do, but people like it. It's funny. And it adds a bit of character, I think, and you can never have too much of that in the game. I am really glad I have done this. This was such a bunch of work. And while I was doing it, I just put on some music, put my mind to zero, and just went. This is the older Roblox car I have, which is on the shelf. It's far too big. Again, this is the import scaling issues I was talking about. I had to re-import it 2 or 3 times before it worked. This is the Zaagbladpad stuff, the police car, the saw blade, the toad itself. This is a guy from Texture, from the first person shooter I made. He's just sitting there being grumpy that I never finished Texture. I like what I did to the main menu, just placing bits and bobs around everywhere. It again adds a little bit of character to what would otherwise be a very sterile scene. Oh, yeah, I know what this is. So, when you open a prefab in Unity and you change something through a script of your own, you need to manually set the prefab as having been changed. Because if it hasn't been changed, you can't save it. So I was opening prefabs, changing stuff with my tool, saving them, but it wouldn't save because Unity didn't know that something had changed. So I had to set them to dirty manually before they would save. I had a bit of issues with that, where I thought, oh, why is Unity broken? It's not saving the changes I made. But it was just my script, which was missing some stuff. This is me going through all of the hats of Zeepkist. All of the hats that are in right now. That's the nice thing about refactoring like stuff. You can go back over your old mistakes and like smooth them all out. I had an issue with the template heads of hats. The first template hat I used to like make sure that the hat fits on top of the head, it was a sphere, and the sphere didn't line up perfectly, so the sphere changed to a capsule. Capsule didn't line up properly, the capsule changed to, I think it's a physical character model. But then the first hats I made still had the sphere, and the later hats had the capsule, and even later hats had the character model. Some hats didn't have it. And I eventually just, because I was going through all of the hats anyway, I could smooth that out, make it all one coherent system, which is going to be useful in the future, where I can just open a new hat, have the template character right there, measure the hat on top of that, and have the hat fit the Zeepkist character in-game straight away. Here I am, again fixing my tool. This was what I was talking about first, where it wouldn't detect missing meshes if the game object was inactive. So I had to rip out the old algorithm and do it all over again. Which again took like, half an hour or so, it feels like. Just testing and trying stuff, making sure it works. This is like most of game development. You come up with an idea, you test it, and it doesn't work. And then you go back and you try again until it does. And here I am going over the hats. Putting in the new reference model, which was just a white capsule with a face on it. The face used to be a texture on top of the model. But I later swapped that out for a 3D model. But the cats, I haven't done it with the cats yet. The cats still have a, a texture. Right, here I was testing to see if the alignment actually made sense. But because I couldn't test Zeepkist inside Unity because that Zeepkist was all fucked up, I had to go into Steam and actually try the Steam Zeepkist version to make sure everything worked. Again, just checking, what is the alignment of the face and the hats and everything. Because if you can just do this in the prefab and don't need to go in and out of game to see if the hat fits, that just speeds things up so much. And here I am, I think, fixing the sun and stuff. These are the stars you see at night. They're just one big one big model that I blew way the hell up, and is projected all around you. And the sun as well. Lots of particles here. This is what I was talking about the restructuring of folders. I have like different layers inside Blender with different types of objects. I had a particle layer, I had a sky layer, and I had an icons layer for some menu stuff, which just makes it a lot easier to keep track of where all your stuff is when you need it. If you have like 60 Blender files to get through to find the one model you need to change, that's not ideal. So if you can just put it all together and do it right, then it works a lot better. And here I was fixing... Oh yeah, I was just testing the tool. And back to fixing models. Just finding the next missing mesh and replacing it with a new mesh. Very, very tedious. You can see the cat, it's pink, because apparently a lot of character models were still partly using the materials from inside the Blender file, which I had now removed from the project, put outside of it. That's the adventure map. Yeah, so like I said, every single scene had to be reconfigured with all of the models that were now missing. And here I'm going through some prefabs. Prefabs are easy, because you just change the prefab, and then everywhere the prefab shows up, it gets fixed. Whereas if you don't have a prefab and something breaks, you need to go through every single object, fix it all over again every single time, which is annoying. I like prefabs, but sometimes you can't use prefabs because like in here, a lot of in the adventure map, a lot of trees aren't prefabs because for some reason that didn't work or something. Oh yeah, because trees are a level editor prefab, and you can't just put a level editor prefab in a random scene, because the level editor prefab will start looking for all sorts of components in the scene that aren't there if you're not in either a game or the level editor. So for the adventure mode, I had to rip out the models of the prefabs and put only the models in there without the overhead. But that did mean that it lost the prefab connection. So that's why I had to go over all of the trees manually. Ah yeah, this is what I was talking about putting stuff dirty. Like prefabs that wouldn't save if it didn't know it had been changed. And here I am going over every single model, fixing the mesh colliders. And then once all of that was done, and I pressed the button to find the next mesh, and there wasn't a new mesh that was missing, or in other words, if all meshes were there, it would give me a little notification in the console that said, "Yep, all of your meshes are okay. You can go on to the next scene," and a smiley face, which was always, very nice to see. And here again, the very tedious process of just going over every single model, figuring out what it used to be, selecting the model, putting it in. And yeah, sometimes I found that I couldn't find the models anymore, and then I had to go into the old Blender files again, put them in the new Blender files, re-export the Blender files. It was the case with the cylinder you can see here. The beige cylinder. Had to find them from the old files. There we go, put them back in. And then it worked again. That happened a couple of times where I wouldn't have exported the model I needed and then had to go find them in like the archives of Blender models. Putting in the highway sign, the classic Dutch highway sign, which is totally on purpose. Games these days are super Americanized, which kind of sucks if you're from Europe, because everything you see is like, oh, welcome to Chicago or New York or Lost, wherever the hell you are. Whereas actually seeing local stuff is super rare, which is a shame, I think. Games are always a lot more fun when you can like connect with them like that. Like, I want to see a game set in bumfuck France, basically, instead of GTA New York 5. I want local stuff. If everything is the same American culture, it all just becomes one big gray blob of the same, right? I mean, if you think fire truck, you think of a big red square American fire truck like they have in the movies. Whereas in Europe, every single country has their own designs, their own stuff, but you barely ever see those. You just see the American stuff. And then if games ever do go to Europe, it's like some sort of it's the games act as if Europe is a super exotic place. Well, it's where I live, you know? So that's why the highway signs and really everything that is culturally based or geographically based, I take inspiration from what I see outside instead of going on Google and Googling highway sign and then copying the American model. No, I just take what I know and go from there. Make it local, make it me. Here I made a new scene to start fixing all of the soapboxes themselves. And as I was doing this, I also figured out that the entire structure of the soapboxes themselves weren't ideal. Inside Zeepkist, the soapbox prefabs are saved like as a script, and the script holds a couple of values. It holds the mesh that it needs, it holds a list of materials it needs, it holds the meshes for the wheel models and stuff, but it doesn't take those from a physical object. So if you need to change a Zeepkist, you need to change only the mesh inside the script without actually seeing what you're changing, which is really confusing, but it worked at the time, and here I am changing that. I'm ripping out the script that doesn't reference anything visual to a script that does reference visual stuff. So now you just place a soapbox model in the prefab. The script then references that model when instantiating a new soapbox, and it just says like, okay, we want the wheel that is from this model, we want the soapbox that is from that model, take the materials from there as well, and just spawn it like that, which it's the same principle, but instead of getting it from a script where you can't see what you're doing, it gets it from a physical 3D model where you can see what you're doing. And because I had to go through every single soapbox prefab, I decided to make that big structural change, which I wouldn't have done otherwise, because why would you go through every single one of your soapbox prefabs to change something structurally when you could just update the game instead? But if you mess something up like disconnecting every single one of your models, then well, you're gonna need to go through everything anyway, so might as well make big structural changes in that case. And that's what we're doing here. What this really meant is that I didn't fix the soapboxes per se. I just made a new template with the new structure and then went over every single one of them and just recreated them. And because the new structure was really easy to work with, that meant it wasn't that much work. I just had to go in and out of Zeepkist every now and then to get a reference of what I was doing. So we're only seeing one wheel right here and one suspension piece. This is because the Soapbox prefab script can just take that one wheel and apply it to every single wheel that is being instantiated. You don't need to put 4 wheels on the prefab when one is fine. There is a optional rear wheel, which is if you want like a wider back wheel than a front wheel, or just a different wheel model. In that case, you can enable the rear wheel, change that model, and the script will see, oh, this rear wheel is now activated. We need to take the mesh from the rear wheel for the rear wheels. This is the rocket. I think this is my favorite Zeepkist model, the rocket. Here's the banana with the banana stickers. The mattress. Nobody understands that this is a mattress for some reason. Like, to me, this looks like a mattress, but apparently nobody gets it. This is the Sinterklaas boat. So Sinterklaas is like the Dutch Santa Claus. He arrives in like November and then leaves on December 5th. But before he leaves, he dumps presents down every kid's chimney if your parents are rich. And then he leaves, goes back to Spain for some reason. I'm not sure why he's from Spain. The stroopwafel Zeepkist. Which is actually one of the most detailed soapboxes I think I have. Here the friet speciaal Zeepkist. People confuse the curry with ketchup, but it's actually curry, like Dutch curry. This is a boat. I mean, now I'm just narrating what you can see. Oh, this is fun. This is a Twingo. I can't call it a Twingo, of course, but it's very obviously based on a Twingo. This is a bathtub. This is more template. The tube frame. These are some of the earliest soapboxes I made. This is the first soapbox model I had, the blue one. Like, I made that all the way back in, like, what was it, 2018 when I started working on Zeepkist. And that is all of the soapbox models done. And now I could go back into Unity and figure out if I had done it well. Here I found out that I had my rear wheel logic reversed. It would only take a different rear wheel if the rear wheel had been disabled, why it should have been when it had been enabled. But that was a quick fix. And once that was fine, I could get to work on more models. Here I was, I think, working on the ragdoll model. See if that had all been properly referenced. Oh yeah, the the locks you can see on the Soapbox select thing, like the garage. I had to make them soapboxes. So the locks are soapboxes and hats, which just display in the same row. Because you can't, it's a list of soapboxes, and you can't put stuff that isn't a soapbox in a list of soapboxes. So the locks have to be soapboxes to fit in the list. It's a bit janky, but that's what game development is like, really. How long do we have left? Oh my god, we still have 15 minutes to go. And this is like sped up 15 times. I recorded this at 2 frames a second, and you're seeing this at 30 frames a second. But if this is getting tedious to you, imagine how I felt while actually doing this. Because this is all I did for like a week or so. Like 3 hours a day, and after that I was just completely done and went and did something else. This is good though, this yellow scene. This is the last bit of the puzzle. This is every single track piece, which I'm now fixing. So I decided to put them all in one big scene so I could, keep track of what I was doing. First, you can see that the wall ride pieces I made had been fixed. So that was promising. Next up were the road pieces themselves. Let me get some water. You can tell that this is like a professional podcast, and I've done this before. I haven't. I barely know what to say. But I mean, what is there to say? This is not very interesting to look at. Again, unless you're a hardcore Zeepkist fan. It's just very, very tedious work. Because, like how many? I have 226 different road prefabs. Am I even... Where the heck? Oh yeah, I'm still recording this. Oh my god. So I'm looking at this time lapse in full screen, and I was looking at my taskbar, and I couldn't see Audacity with which I was recording this thing like for the past half hour. So I kind of freaked out there for a second. But as I was saying, I have 225, give or take, individual track pieces, and these individual track pieces have 1 to 8 individual models. Let's say if there's 4 on average, that means there's about 1,000 game objects that I needed to go through, select the correct mesh, go on to the next one, select the correct mesh, on to the next one. Sometimes the meshes were missing, like I said before, and I had to go into the archives and get them back and re-export them. 1,000 models, just for the track pieces alone. But now that they are FBX models instead of blend models, they should not break in the future. I've already tried to, like when I was done, I pushed this to GitHub, and then I went to another computer of mine, my laptop, downloaded the new version of the repository onto there to see if, getting it from GitHub still worked, and it did still work. So that's confirmation that whatever I'm doing, it did help, and I should have less GitHub issues in the future. I think it's also got to do with the library folder inside Unity, which, as far as I understand it, is like a big list of references from game objects to like the asset files, really. And I think removing that before downloading an older version or a newer version and having the library rebuild itself helps a lot with not corrupting any references. I think I'm not a big expert on the library folder. I just know that you don't necessarily need it, and if you do keep it, it sometimes messes things up. And all of the track files you see, the track pieces, there are many more that I still need to model and build inside Blender and then put into Unity. All sorts of different, configurations and curves and hills and all sorts of stuff, all sorts of nature pieces that I still need to do. What you're seeing here, this is just the tip of the iceberg of what Zeepkist is supposed to become in the future. At this point, the main track pieces were done, so you could race or drive simple tracks. So that was good. That was nice. That was hopeful. From then on, I went to the tubes. The tubes have rings inside of them, which you can only see if you make the tube transparent. Zeepkist originally did not launch with those rings inside the tubes, but that meant that on transparent tubes you couldn't see the corner. You had no idea where the tube was going. So I added those rings to give a perspective kind of thingy, so people would know what direction the tube was going in. And still people have a lot of issues with tubes for some reason, but the logic behind this is very simple. You want to take the tube in the path of least resistance, basically. A lot of people, they try to stick down to the bottom of the tube and then try to steer inside the tube, which just slows you down. What you're supposed to do is you're supposed to see them as wall rides, basically. If you go on the wall of a tube, you can carry a lot more momentum because you're not losing velocity to steering and to drifting and stuff. And if you can then take a super smooth line through the tube where you're not drifting and losing momentum, then you can keep a lot of speed that, for some reason, a lot of people don't intuitively understand that that's how tubes work, which is interesting. I probably need to tutorialize that or something when I get to making the actual adventure mode, because the current adventure mode is very much temporary. Here I am going through every single grass piece that I have as of now, which again is just the tip of the iceberg of stuff that needs to be put in. Yeah, here you can see every single one of my, what do you call it? Like the terrain blocks. A lot of which I also still need to put in. And again, this is not exhaustive. I still need to add more terrain models as well. For some reason, making a terrain system is super difficult. I know I don't want to work with height maps. I don't like that aesthetic. I know that voxel-based cube marching terrains are super difficult to program, so I'm not gonna burn my fingers with that, I suppose. So I need to do a block-based terrain system, but then you have so many different types of corners and wedge types that don't connect to each other, which then need super complex new blocks to connect them. It's all one big mess, and I'm still not sure if this is the best way to go. But yeah, we'll see. Because terrain doesn't need to be, like super realistic. If you can approach an approximation of what terrain feels like, then you've already won half the battle. Like my trees, they're super simple, and the player's imagination eventually takes over the missing detail. And I use that in my models, and I don't. Yeah. I think I can also expand that to the terrain system philosophy itself. I just need to, do some thinking about that. Oh, yeah. So the mesh fixing algorithm, where it would copy the mesh from the renderer and then put it on a, a mesh collider. It would sometimes see the meshes from text meshes as mesh filters, which was completely wrong, so I had to filter that out. And here you can see the first level working. Every single model from the first level was now back in. And this was telling me again that I was on the right path, that this was just, it was doing something and it was working, and it wasn't all just 11 hours of wasted time. Here's the pedway pieces. I saw a video on pedway systems, which are complicated pedestrian routes through cities, often elevated or through tunnels and stuff, and I really like the aesthetic of that, the idea and principle as well, so I decided to put some pedway pieces in, and they are really nice pieces to use. I think the glass tunnels and stuff, they add a lot. Here are all of my lights. You can tell I'm a bit out of breath when I talk. I need to like catch my breath often. I had this short medical episode like a while back, a couple weeks ago, shortly after launch. I was dizzy for like a month. I had no energy at all. Felt really burnt out. I had this shortage of breath that you can still kind of hear and feel in my voice. And I went to the doctor and had it checked out, did blood tests and everything. I don't have post-COVID symptoms. I don't have other viruses. I don't have Pfeiffer. I don't have, I don't know if they call it that in English. I don't have, what do they call it? Yeah. Well, there's an organ, which was, again, it was fine. So it wasn't anything biologically. So the doctor figured out that basically I was so stressed out because of launch and because of expectations of how well sales were going to do that yeah, I got dizzy because of it. I was so stressed out that I got dizzy and out of breath and all that sort of stuff. So I think that's kind of a burnout, which is not ideal. So I just know I need to be careful with that in the future, not to let that happen again. But it is a very, what do you call it? An existential worry that you have, of course. I'm not in this for it to be my hobby solely. I want to make money off of this. I want to make a life off of this. And if Zeepkist doesn't sell enough, if not enough people play this, then that can't happen. Well, it can't happen. And that is a cause of a lot of worry, because I don't know what I would be doing if, well, not game development. So I really want to be able to keep doing this. And that, yeah, causes a lot of stress sometimes. Especially after launch. I need more players, basically. And I know what I need to do to get more players. I need to add online multiplayer, for one, which is really difficult. But I'm going to try it. I've said a lot of times that I am not planning it. I'm still not planning it. I am right now planning to investigate it. Because if you go to Trackmania way, where there is no collisions between different cars and stuff, then it's a lot easier to actually program online multiplayer. And I think that no collisions online multiplayer is possible. It is something that I could do. So I'm going to investigate that. Next, I need workshop support, so people can share levels. That's kind of what I was working on before everything messed up. So after this is done, I'm going back to making workshop support, which should bring in a lot of players and would be really nice for streamers to have some community interaction, where the community can make levels and the streamer can try them out. What you're seeing here is me testing all of the models if they actually work again, which a lot of them did. And another thing I really need or want is a online leaderboards of levels, which is difficult because you need a server, you need some sort of website that can host levels and can download levels into Zeepkist while you're playing, and then upload times and make sure that the times aren't fraudulent. It's a gigantic can of worms to do that, basically. But it's, again, something that would probably bring in a lot of players and which would make a lot of players really happy. But again, it's a lot of work. But then again, the level editor, Jesus Christ, the level editor you're seeing right here was also a lot of work. And I also did that, so, never say never. And yeah, I'm almost done here. I'm just going through fixing the particles now. This entire thing when life gives you lemons, make lemonade, they say. And, well, this is what that was, kind of. In the process of doing this, I fixed, the model structure. Like, I cleaned up a lot of trash models that I didn't need. I restructured the hats. I restructured the soapboxes themselves. Here I am uploading it to GitHub because I was done. I did a lot of things that I wouldn't have been able to do, or I wouldn't have figured to do, if all of my models hadn't broken. And I think that Zeepkist is less of a mess because of it. It's a little bit more structured, a little bit more sensible, and a little bit more nicer to work with. So that's going to be very interesting for the future. And, well, I'm just watching the time lapse on repeat now. I'm done. Well, I hope you enjoyed my first, developer commentary, I suppose. It was pretty weird. I'm not a radio personality or anything like that, so I'm not sure if I've done the best job, but whatever. If you enjoyed this, leave a like, subscribe, whatever. Thumbs up in the comments. Is that what they say? Follow me on Twitch. I don't have a Twitch. If you like that, just let me know. Follow the Discord by Zeepkist if you haven't. And maybe we'll do this again. Maybe not. Who knows? Maybe it's just a one-time thing. I'm gonna go now. Have fun. See ya.